in New York. The disaster continues with the Jets, Aaron
Oh,
Rodgers, and oh my God, I will argue the Jets situation is worse than the Giants just because of the expectations.
and again, I will ask this question:
Go ahead.
how much longer do the Jets just feel like they just have nothing better to do but be held hostage by this guy? Like, just get rid of him already. I know it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. I know he structured his contract in such a way that he's got all the advantages here. But this is a disaster. And how you didn't know this was a disaster when he tore his Achilles, and forgive me for a moment, let me put this out there. Wasn't it at all like set in stone when he got the injury on the first game of the football season last year, right? Because
Yeah,
what was the date?
9/11, wasn't
It
it?
was September 11th.
Yeah.
It was the same date as 9/11. It was 23 years ago, 22 years after that incident, and he was a Jet. Like, I mean, he's the curse of 9/11 that came back to New York 22 years after the original 9/11, right?
Mm,
Like, I mean,
yeah.
of all the curses to happen, Aaron Rodgers was never going to come back the same quarterback. You don't tear your Achilles and then, oh yeah, I'm going to be fine a year later. And then, by the way, while I'm sitting there in on my Achilles rehab, let me go on every podcast and tell everyone about how much vaccines don't work. And suddenly I'm a political and medical expert on things that no one cares about. And I'm going to go on the Pat McAfee show, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Oh, I know
I'm
you
going to
will.
I'm going to spout off all this nonsense for a year because I've got nothing better to do but just prop my leg up on a bench for 9 months while I watch my team flounder around in obscurity for an entire season. I mean, look, I get it. He was a great quarterback at one point in time. He is nowhere near that quarterback anymore.
He's
And
not even good
the
anymore.
idea
That's the
that the
worst part.
Jets were going to be somehow better with him has been just an absolute train wreck from day one.
This is the worst part too. Also, like it was one thing where like 5 years ago, where like, oh, he's a pain in the ass, but he's worth it because he's just that damn good, and it was worth it. Now it's like, okay, he's not even good anymore. On top of everything else, now
Right.
he can't move anymore. On top, he's not even
Right.
mobile anymore.
Now he's like watching a crippled old man at an old age home try to get around and throw a football. That
Yeah,
you're not signing him to a contract.
he aged really fast this year. Like I mean,
Yeah.
obviously that injury obviously played a large part in that. But he was on McAfee yesterday.
Who was
To
the
his use.
before we get to the McAfee thing?
Go ahead.
Who was a bigger disaster post their Green Bay career? Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers?
Oh, easily Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Favre had an MVP type year the year after going to mid. First off, the Jets actually won a couple of games. They were in the playoff hunt. Favre obviously tailed off late in the year, but at least that team was competitive
Right.
with New York. Even if you take away the Minnesota year after, it's still Favre,
Right.
which is crazy because I'm a bigger fan of Rodgers than Favre. I think Rodgers is a better
Exactly,
quarterback than
because
Favre, but
history tells us that Brett Favre was a douchebag, right? History tells us that Brett Favre was bad for Green Bay, and he was bad in New York, he was bad in Minnesota. He was just a bad guy, right? Now you have
right.
the stuff that's happened in his last couple of years. So Brett Favre has kind of a bad name.
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers makes Brett Favre look like Johnny Unitas, for crying out
Oh
loud.
my God, yeah. Oh my God. Anyway, so yesterday Brett Favre was on Pat McAfee doing his usual weekly on there, and because there's been some rumors now about his future, about whether or not the Jets may release him or the Jets don't want him back or cut him at the end of the year. Who knows? It could be week to week. So he addressed one of those rumors yesterday on Pat McAfee here.
There's a lot of things out of my control when it comes to that. But I've really enjoyed my time in New York. I mean, obviously we haven't had the success that we've all wanted to have, but I've made some great friendships on the team. I've enjoyed living in Jersey. I've enjoyed time in the city. I've enjoyed getting to know the fans. And I came here to win here. So I'm not jumping off ship, like, oh, I definitely want to play and not in New York. Like, I don't even know if I want to play yet, but New York would be my first option. There's a lot of things out of my.
Your thoughts on he says that if he first off he's retirement's on the table, number one, and if he does come back, the Jets are still number one option. Your thoughts on that?
Well, see, okay, so if I'm the Jets, all I hear is I don't know if I want to come back. Well, then if I'm the Jets organization and I'm the guy who writes the checks for that organization, I'm the one who's recommending, well, we have the cards on our side of the table. We hold the cards. we're not going to re-sign you. We don't want you back.
Do they?
If you don't, huh?
Do they though? Is he on the contract next year?
Well, he's under contract, but if he doesn't want to come back and he doesn't have a firm commitment, then say that to him. Hey, you don't have a commitment. We have a commitment to try to replace you. We have a commitment to try and move on from you. We have a commitment to an organization and a fan base and ticket holders who want to see a winning product on the field rather than you standing there holding us hostage for another year. So that decision needs to be made in the front office. And if that means they have to take a cap hit for a year, then by all means, take a cap hit and just get rid of the cancer that is hanging over your organization.
I think he's back next year. I don't know why. I just think he's back next year.
Oh, I think he'll be back next year too, because the Jets have no spine and they won't stand up and they won't do the right thing. Look, I said the same thing. This is unrelated to Aaron Rodgers. There was a moment right before the World Series, and we'll get to the Dodgers in a minute. There was a moment before the World Series when Clayton Kershaw told Fox Television or Fox Sports or someone on MLB Network, hey, I'm really looking forward to coming back and playing next year for the Dodgers, blah, blah, blah. Wait a second. Clayton Kershaw, you don't get to make that call. We do as an organization. You have been an injury risk with your back and your knees and your foot and your hand, your arm. You've been an injury risk for the better part of 3 seasons. I still remember Clayton Kershaw sitting in the dugout after the Dodgers got their ass kicked in the first inning of the divisional series in 2023 because he was dead tired and he couldn't throw a fastball over the plate anymore. It's not your call. Now, for Aaron Rodgers, yeah, he's got some financial ties, and the Jets have financial ties. But it's time for ownership and businessmen to make business decisions that are in the best interest of their organization. And maybe that means cutting ties with someone who isn't doing your organization any good anymore.
Yeah, very true. I mean, is he under contract next year? No.
Kershaw?
Kershaw's got a 1 year.
Kersha's got a 1 year deal.
Yeah, so he's technically a free agent next year, right now, should I say?
Right, and you know, and but he doesn't get to make that call, and that's the thing that I wish ownership of organizations took a greater stand on this, like. You know, and we'll get into one other really quick, like when LeBron James's kid says, I'm not going to be drafted by the Lakers, I'm not going to play in the NBA. At that exact moment, the Lakers organization should have been like, well, see ya. Have fun in Australia. Yeah. Instead, you drafted this guy.
Because you know why, though?
Of course you know why. But I mean, when did ownership decide that it was okay to be held hostage by an athlete? When did that become a thing?
I'm with you, brother. I look. I was a guy that initially 10 years ago was like, okay, player empowerment, yeah, go ahead, boom, boom, boom. It has done more bad than good for sports overall, especially for fans now. I agree, 100%. One last thing on